What if I told you that in the winter of 1924, a small clinic in Zurich held a secret that would make every modern physicist question the very nature of reality? It wasn't a weapon or a machine, but a 12-year-old boy named Leo, whose brain didn't process seconds the way yours does. While you and I see a bird flap its wings as a blur of motion, Leo saw the individual microscopic fractures in the air. He described the sound of a falling glass, not as a sudden crash, but as a slow, agonizing symphony of crystalline stress. His doctors recorded these sessions in journals that were buried for decades because the implications were too disturbing for the public to handle. They didn't think he was magic. They thought he was a glitch in the human evolutionary timeline. But then, the experiments took a dark turn that no one expected.
Leo's condition was eventually labeled as extreme tachypsychia, a neurological state where the mind outruns the body. In his journals, Dr. Hans Vogel noted the smell of ozone in the room whenever Leo became overstimulated, a physical manifestation of a brain firing at impossible speeds. Imagine sitting in a silent room and hearing the rhythmic, heavy thud of a heartbeat, but realizing it's not yours, it's the person across from you. Leo could see the sweat glands on a man's forehead open and release moisture before the man even felt hot. He was living in the gaps between the moments we call now. This wasn't a superpower to him. It was a claustrophobic prison. He once told Vogel that a single conversation felt like it lasted for 3 days because he had to wait so long for the words to leave the doctor's mouth.
The first real test of his ability happened during a routine physical exam that ended in a terrifying display of precognition. A tray of surgical steel instruments was bumped by a nurse, sending dozens of scalpels and forceps screaming toward the floor. In a normal world, the sound would be instantaneous, but Leo didn't move like a normal human. He stepped through the falling metal with a grace that looked like liquid. He caught 3 different instruments mid-air, but that wasn't the part that haunted the staff. It was the look on his face. He wasn't excited or proud. He looked exhausted, as if he had just run a marathon while everyone else was blinking. He saw the world as a frozen, dead landscape where he was the only thing truly alive. This realization began to rot his psyche from the inside out, leading to a deep, silent resentment.
Psychologists today look back at Vogel's notes and see a boy who is experiencing the ultimate form of isolation. When you can see the micro expressions of a lie forming on a parent's face before they even speak, trust becomes an impossible concept. Leo began to withdraw, refusing to look people in the eye because the shutter speed of their blinking was too violent for him to watch. He started spending his nights in the dark, claiming that the flicker of electric lights felt like a strobe light at a funeral. It was here that the academic facade of the clinic began to crumble. The researchers weren't just studying him anymore. They were trying to find a way to harvest this perception for the military. They wanted soldiers who could see the path of a bullet before it was fired, ignoring the boy's deteriorating mental state.
Then came the night of the Great Stasis, a moment recorded in 3 separate journals with shaking handwriting. Leo was placed in a high-stress environment designed to trigger his temporal dilation to its maximum capacity. They didn't tell him the floor was rigged to collapse into a safety net. When the floor dropped, the observers behind the glass saw Leo simply vanish for a fraction of a second, only to reappear on the far side of the room. He hadn't jumped, he had walked, but his hair had turned shock white and his nose was pouring blood that looked almost black. He had pushed his objective time so far that his body had aged weeks in the span of a single second. This was the moment the researchers realized that controlling time wasn't about the world slowing down. It was about your life burning out faster.
The trauma of that night changed Leo's personality into something unrecognizable and cold. He stopped speaking English and began whispering in a rhythmic, clicking cadence that the staff couldn't decode. It was later suggested by linguistic experts that he was speaking at a speed that matched his internal clock, compressed and dense. He looked at his doctors not as mentors, but as slow-moving statues, pathetic and stagnant. He began to exhibit signs of extreme repressed rage, the kind that comes from being trapped in a room with people who take an eternity to breathe. He realized he wasn't part of their world, and he didn't want to be. The records show he started drawing maps of the clinic, but they weren't layouts of the rooms. They were timelines of when every guard would be looking away.